My wife, Cara, worked at one of the most popular nightclubs in town. It was her dream job, or so she had always said, thriving in the late-night energy, dancing to the rhythm of music, and mingling with people. I admired her passion, her ability to bring joy and light into a room, and her confidence. But over time, something changed. It started small. Her texts became shorter, her laughter at my jokes grew faint, and her phone rarely left her hand. Her gaze fixated on the screen in ways that made me feel invisible. When I brought it up, she would dismiss it with a wave of her hand, saying, "It's just work stuff. You know how crazy it gets at the club?" I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. Then came the day she didn't come home. 3 days passed, and all I had were unanswered calls, vague text replies like, busy, or worse, total silence. I felt a storm brewing in my chest, but I refused to jump to conclusions. She had always been independent, fiercely so. Maybe she was at a friend's, or something came up at work. Still, as I sat alone on our couch those 3 nights, my mind conjured every possible scenario. By the fourth morning, I had reached my limit. I decided to go to the club. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation, or maybe she had forgotten her phone and was overwhelmed by shifts. It felt foolish, desperate even, but I had to know what was going on. When I arrived, the neon lights of the nightclub seemed garish under the harsh light of day. I asked for her, expecting a quick answer, maybe even an apology for the scare she had put me through. Instead, I got knowing smirks, subtle whispers, and side eyes from the staff. Finally, a burly bouncer approached me, his face unreadable but his voice dripping with pity. "You must be Jake," he said. My name coming from his lips felt wrong, like a trespass. "You should probably talk to some of the guys." Before I could ask what he meant, a small group of men approached. Each carried a demeanor that was neither angry nor mocking, but oddly apologetic. One by one, they introduced themselves, and each confession hit me harder than the last. They were my wife's lovers. Not one, not two, but a lot. The web of betrayal they painted was sprawling, grotesque, and utterly shattering. One of them even tried to explain, "We didn't know she was married." She said, but I didn't need to hear the rest. The image of Cara, my Cara, intertwined in lies, surrounded by shadows, burned in my mind. How could she do this? How long had this been going on? And most haunting of all, why didn't I see it? I left without a word, my legs moving on autopilot as my heart crumbled. By the time I got home, I realized something. I wasn't just betrayed. I was erased. Everything we built, every promise we made, every tender moment, it was all a farce. But in that moment, as despair took root, a fire also began to flicker. Betrayal might have stolen my peace, but it would not steal my strength. If she thought I would crumble, she was wrong. This was far from over. I sat in the stillness of our living room, my mind whirling like a storm I couldn't escape. Every photo on the walls, every piece of furniture, every trinket on the shelves, all of it seemed like a monument to a lie. The 3 days of her silence had pushed me to the brink, but the confessions at the nightclub shoved me past it. She had made her choice. Now, I would make mine. By the time she finally called, my heart was stone. Her voice sounded casual, almost dismissive. "Hey, Jake. Sorry, things got crazy at work. You know how it is." I didn't respond. Instead, I told her we needed to talk when she got home. I could hear the pause on the other end, the slight crack in her practiced facade. "Okay, sure," she said, her tone lighter now, but I knew her too well. She was nervous. She should be. The hours crawled by, and when the garage door finally creaked open, I felt my fists clench involuntarily. She strolled in, her expression carefully blank, but there was a flicker of guilt in her eyes, a look I might have missed before, but now it burned like a neon sign. "What's this about?" she asked, setting her bag down as though nothing had happened. I didn't mince words. "Who are they?" Her face froze. "Who?" she asked, her voice feigning innocence, but I saw the tremble in her hands. "The men," I said, "at the club. The ones you've been spending your nights with while I was here, waiting for you." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it, spin another web of lies. But then she let out a sharp laugh, bitter, defiant. "You don't understand," she said. "You never have." Her audacity floored me. "What don't I understand, Kara? That you threw away everything we built together? That you've been making a fool of me? You don't even have the decency to be sorry." She glared at me, a flash of something I couldn't quite place. Anger? Resentment? Defensiveness? "You think I wanted this," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how suffocating this marriage has been? You're so predictable, so boring. I needed more than this life you thought was perfect." Her words were daggers, each one aimed at the life I thought we shared. But instead of crumbling, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. I'd heard enough. "Fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You want out? You've got it. But let me be clear. When this is over, you'll have nothing. Not the house, not the car, not even a shred of dignity." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You're not that kind of man, Jake. You're all talk." And there it was. The ultimate insult. She didn't believe I had it in me to fight back. It was at that moment I realized how little she understood me. She had spent years underestimating the quiet, patient man who had loved her unconditionally. Now, she would learn what that man was capable of when pushed too far. I left the room without another word, her accusations echoing in my ears. I went to our bedroom, closed the door, and sat down on the bed. My heart was pounding, but my mind was already working, calculating, planning. She had her lovers. She had her lies. But there was one thing she cared about more than anything. Her dog, a tiny Pomeranian named Peanut. That dog was her world. The one thing she doted on without fail. The one thing that could draw a genuine smile from her. She took everything from me, but she wouldn't get to keep everything she loved. That night, as she slept in the guest room, I began my preparations. I contacted a lawyer, started organizing my finances, and made a list of everything she had done to betray me. She had built her house of cards, and I was going to tear it down. When I finally lay down in bed, the plan was clear in my mind. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my power, my life. Kara had unleashed a storm, and now it was her turn to weather it. The next morning, I woke up early. Kara was still asleep in the guest room. If she could sleep at all. I could hear Peanut's little paws clicking against the hardwood floor as he trotted around, blissfully unaware of the tension gripping the house. For a brief moment, I felt guilty about what I was planning. Peanut didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire. But then I thought about Kara, about how she treated me like a placeholder, a convenience. The guilt disappeared. My first call was to a lawyer. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted it done on my terms. Kara thought she knew me, thought she could predict my every move. That was her mistake. I wasn't going to confront her in anger or let her drag me into endless arguments. No, I would hit her where it hurt, her reputation, her finances, and yes, even her heart. The lawyer was sharp, no nonsense, and worth every penny. After I explained everything, she laid out a strategy. Gather evidence. Proof of infidelity would be crucial, not just for leverage, but to ensure the court saw her true character. Secure assets. Freeze accounts, change passwords, and protect my finances before she got wind of what was coming. Leverage the dog. The law might not care about Peanut, but Kara's love for that dog could be a bargaining chip. She's not going to see this coming, the lawyer assured me. By the time Kara stumbled out of the guest room, still groggy and disheveled, I was already in action. I watched her pour herself coffee, her eyes darting toward me. "What's with the silent treatment?" she asked, her voice tinged with annoyance. I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up Peanut, scratching his ears as I carried him toward the front door. "Where are you going?" she demanded, a hint of alarm creeping into her tone. "Out," I said curtly, not looking back. In truth, I had errands to run. I set up a consultation with a private investigator to dig deeper into her affairs. I opened a separate bank account in my name only. I even visited a kennel, ensuring Peanut would have a safe and comfortable place to stay when the time came. I returned home that afternoon to find Kara sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a distracted expression. She barely acknowledged me as I walked past, but I didn't care. Let her stew in her own self-importance, I thought. She still believed she held the upper hand. That evening, I began compiling the evidence. I reached out to the bouncer at the nightclub and a few of the men who had confessed to being involved with Kara. To my surprise, many of them were eager to help. She lied to us too, one of them said. We didn't know she was married. They sent me text messages, photos, even screenshots of conversations. Piece by piece, I built a case that would paint a clear picture of her betrayal. Later that night, as I reviewed the files on my laptop, Peanut curled up beside me on the couch. Kara had locked herself in the guest room again, leaving the house in an uneasy silence. I stared at the little dog, his eyes half closed in contentment, and made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he wouldn't suffer because of her actions. By the time I went to bed, the lines were drawn. Kara might have thought she was untouchable, but she was about to learn that I wasn't the man she thought I was. This was no longer about saving the marriage or finding closure. This was war. The next morning, Kara left for work as if nothing was wrong. Her attitude was cool, distant, almost defiant. I watched her walk out the door without a word, her heels clicking against the pavement, Peanut following her to the threshold with a wagging tail. She didn't even glance back. Good, I thought. Let her keep thinking she's in control. As soon as the car pulled away, I set my plan in motion. My first stop was the lawyer's office. The private investigator I had hired sent over his initial findings. Records of her rendezvous, corroborating accounts from others at the nightclub, even surveillance footage. The sheer scope of her deceit was staggering. With all the evidence in hand, my lawyer crafted a divorce filing that would leave Kara reeling. It was clean, precise, and devastating. She had betrayed our marriage in every way imaginable, and the courts would see it. I signed the documents with steady hands. Are you sure about the dog? The lawyer asked as she reviewed the details. She might try to use that against you. I nodded. Peanut's coming with me. That's non-negotiable. By the time I returned home, the locks on the house had been changed. The lawyer had advised me to act swiftly to protect myself, and I didn't hesitate. Kara had shown no respect for our vows, and I owed her no courtesy. When she arrived home later that night, she jiggled the doorknob, confusion giving way to irritation. I opened the door just as she began pounding on it. What the hell is this? She snapped. We need to talk, I said, my voice calm but firm. She stormed past me into the house, tossing her bag onto the couch. You're being ridiculous, Jake. Changing the locks? Are you trying to embarrass me? No, Kara, I replied. I'm trying to protect myself. I handed her the divorce papers. For a moment, she just stared at them, her face frozen in disbelief. Then she laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You're serious, she said, her voice laced with incredulity. I've never been more serious in my life. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. When she saw the evidence, the photos, the texts, the records of her escapades, her face paled. You spied on me? I raised an eyebrow. Don't pretend you're the victim here, Kara. You made this choice. She dropped the papers onto the table, crossing her arms as her expression hardened. You think this makes you look strong? Filing for divorce and taking my dog? That's pathetic, Jake. You won't go through with it. Her words stung, but I refused to rise to her bait. Instead, I leaned forward, meeting her gaze with steel in my eyes. It's done, Kara. You wanted freedom? You've got it. But don't think for a second that you'll walk away unscathed. For a moment, there was silence, the weight of my words hanging between us. Then she stood, her face twisted with anger. Fine. If this is the way you want it, you can have your little revenge. But don't forget, Jake, you're the one who couldn't keep me happy. She grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door. Oh, and one more thing. I called after her, my voice cold. Peanut stays with me. You can pick up your things tomorrow, but the dog is mine. She froze, her hand on the doorknob. When she turned back to me, her eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and fury. You're not serious. Dead serious, I said. I'll see you in court if you want to fight for him. But we both know you're in no position to win. Her expression flickered with uncertainty, but she didn't argue. Instead, she slammed the door behind her, leaving the house and Peanut, behind. As I locked the door and leaned against it, I felt an odd mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also a strange sense of finality. This was only the beginning, but it was a beginning on my terms. Kara had always underestimated me. Now, she would see what happens when you push someone too far. Kara didn't come back the next day. At first, I thought she was too angry to face me, but as the hours passed and her absence stretched into the evening, I realized she was stalling. I knew her well enough to guess her next move. She'd be scrambling to regain control, probably concocting a strategy with her lovers or leaning on her circle of enablers. I wasn't about to let her dictate the pace. The following morning, I went to the kennel where Peanut was staying temporarily. When he saw me, his tiny body wriggled with excitement, his fluffy tail wagging so fast it was a blur. I scooped him up, holding him close. He was more than just a pawn in this mess. He was a reminder of what I had to protect. I made a promise to Peanut as I drove home. No matter what Kara tried, I would fight for him. Later that day, the lawyer called with an update. Kara had officially been served, but there was more. She's already talking to another attorney, the lawyer said. She's contesting the divorce and claiming she deserves the house and custody of the dog. She's grasping at straws, I replied, though her brazenness still caught me off guard. My lawyer chuckled. She's in for a rude awakening. Given the evidence we have, her claims will fall apart in court. But be prepared. She may try to stir up drama to save face. And stir up drama she did. That evening, I received a call from one of Kara's co-workers at the nightclub, a woman named Ashley. We had never been close, but I remembered her as the more level-headed one in Kara's chaotic group of friends. Jake, I thought you should know, Ashley began hesitantly. Kara's been telling people you're being abusive and controlling. She's saying that's why she cheated. My jaw tightened. That's a lie, I said, my voice steady but cold. I figured, Ashley replied. I just thought you should be aware. A lot of people at the club don't believe her, especially after the way she's been acting. But she's trying to spin the story in her favor. I thanked Ashley for the heads up, but my blood boiled as I hung up. Kara's attempts to paint herself as the victim were infuriating, but they weren't surprising. This was her pattern: deflect, manipulate, and evade responsibility. I refused to let her rewrite the narrative. The next day, I met with my lawyer to discuss the latest developments. Kara's smear campaign is predictable, she said. The important thing is to stick to the facts. The evidence we have is strong enough to counter any false claims she makes. But as prepared as I was, nothing could have prepared me for what came next. That evening, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I was met by a man I didn't recognize. One of Kara's many lovers, I assumed. He was tall, lean, and visibly uncomfortable. I need to talk to you, he said, avoiding my gaze. I folded my arms, leaning against the doorframe. What could you possibly have to say to me? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I didn't know she was married at first, okay? But when I found out, I ended it. I wanted no part of it. The thing is, she's been lying to me too. For a moment, I didn't respond, caught off guard by his apparent sincerity. What do you mean? She told me she was leaving you because you were dangerous, that you were emotionally abusive. But then she kept coming back to me, saying she wasn't sure what she wanted. I feel like I've been played too. His words hung in the air, and as much as I wanted to dismiss him, I could see the genuine regret in his expression. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I thought you should know what kind of person she really is, he said. She's using everyone around her. And honestly, I feel guilty. I didn't want to be part of this mess. I closed the door without another word, my mind racing. Kara's web of lies was more tangled than I had realized, and now it was unraveling faster than even she could control. By the time I went to bed that night, one thing was clear. Kara wasn't just fighting me, she was fighting herself. And she was losing. The following days were quieter than I anticipated, but the stillness only made me more uneasy. Kara had always been a master of chaos, and I knew she wasn't the type to let things lie. She was plotting something. I could feel it. I spent my mornings at work, throwing myself into tasks to distract from the growing storm, and my evenings sifting through more evidence with my lawyer. Peanut's joyful presence became my lifeline in the middle of the tension. He was oblivious to the turmoil, happy just to sit by my side or chase a ball around the living room. On Friday night, the first crack in Kara's composure appeared. She called me for the first time since storming out of the house. I debated ignoring it but decided to answer, curious about what angle she'd take this time. Her voice was oddly calm, almost casual. "Jake, we need to stop this before it gets ugly. Think about everything we've been through together." It was laughable, hearing her try to appeal to sentiment after all the destruction she'd caused. "Ugly? Kara, it got ugly the moment you started sleeping around. The papers have been filed. It's over." She let out a bitter laugh, the mask of calm slipping. "You're not being reasonable. You don't have to take everything from me. I made mistakes, okay, but I don't deserve this." I gripped the phone tighter, anger surging in my chest. "Mistakes? Is that what you call it? You didn't just cheat, Kara. You lied, manipulated, and humiliated me. Don't try to play the victim now." Her tone turned icy. "You're pathetic, Jake. Taking Peanut? That's low, even for you. He's my dog and you know it." I forced a laugh. Peanut doesn't belong to someone who walks out and abandons him for days at a time. He deserves better, and that's what he'll get. She went silent for a moment, her breath audible on the line. When she spoke again, her voice was laced with venom. "Fine, do what you want, but don't think for a second that you'll come out of this clean. People will know the truth, Jake, about how controlling you were, about how I was driven to this." "Go ahead," I said. "Tell your lies. Just remember, I have the receipts to prove otherwise. You made your bed, Kara. Now lie in it." I hung up before she could respond. The anger simmered in me long after the call ended. Her audacity was astounding, but it didn't surprise me. She had spent years twisting reality to suit her needs. The next morning, Ashley from the nightclub called again, this time with a warning. "She's spreading rumors, Jake, telling everyone you're a monster. But people are starting to catch on. Even some of her so-called friends don't believe her anymore." The mask Kara wore so expertly was beginning to crumble, and as it did, her true nature was exposed for all to see. I just needed to wait. The storm she'd created was about to consume her. The weekend was eerily quiet. Kara didn't call again, nor did I hear from her through any of the usual channels. But instead of relief, I felt tension building, like the moments before a storm unleashes its fury. I knew her silence wasn't submission. It was the calm before her next move. Monday morning brought confirmation. As I walked into my office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was a screenshot, a furious rant from Kara in a group chat with several of her friends. She claimed I was abusive, controlling, and that I had cheated on her first. It was the same tired narrative she had tried to spin with the nightclub crowd, but this time, it was directed at people who had known us both for years. "She's spiraling," the sender wrote. It was Ashley again, her loyalties clearly no longer with Kara. "Most of us aren't buying it, but you should know she's trying to drag your name through the mud." I thanked her and set the phone down, trying to keep my composure. Kara's lies weren't just desperate, they were dangerous. She was trying to provoke me, to paint herself as the victim in a story of her own making. But I wasn't going to play her game. I called my lawyer immediately, forwarding the screenshots. "This is perfect," she said. "It shows her instability and intent to manipulate others. It'll only strengthen our case." Later that afternoon, I received a call from Kara's lawyer. The tone was cold and clipped, the words carefully rehearsed. "My client insists that the dog belongs to her, and that your actions constitute emotional cruelty. She's requesting immediate custody of Peanut." I couldn't help but laugh. Cruelty? She's the one who left him for days without a word. Peanut's staying with me. The lawyer paused, clearly thrown off by my confidence. "Then we'll see you in court." "Looking forward to it," I replied, hanging up. The court date was set for the following week, but Kara's unraveling escalated long before then. On Wednesday, another text from Ashley arrived, this one containing a video. It was Kara at the nightclub, clearly intoxicated, ranting to a small group of coworkers. "He's so boring," she slurred, waving a drink in the air. "All he does is play the victim." I should have left him years ago. I don't care about the stupid dog. I'll take him just to make Jake suffer. I watched the video twice, each time feeling a mix of anger and vindication. She was handing me exactly what I needed, a public display of her true intentions. By the time Friday rolled around, the tides had fully turned. Friends who once stood by her were now messaging me with support. Even Peanut's vet, a longtime family friend, called to offer a character reference if it came to court. Kara's storm was raging, but it wasn't hitting me. It was tearing her apart, and I was ready to weather whatever came next. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected, though every moment leading up to it had felt like an eternity. Peanut sat on my lap that morning as I drank my coffee, his tiny head resting against my chest. I scratched behind his ears, feeling the calm he brought me in the storm Kara had created. This wasn't just about the dog. Peanut had become a symbol of everything Kara thought she could take from me. My dignity, my stability, my peace. But today, the truth would speak louder than her lies. The courthouse was bustling when I arrived, the hum of lawyers, clerks, and tense clients filling the air. My lawyer, sharp as ever, met me at the door, her leather briefcase tucked neatly under her arm. "Are you ready?" she asked, her gaze steady. I nodded, more resolute than I felt. "Let's do this." Inside the courtroom, Kara was already seated, her posture stiff, her expression a blend of anger and smugness. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, and she threw me a quick glance, her lips curling into a faint smirk. I didn't react. Let her have her games. I had truth on my side. The hearing began with Kara's lawyer presenting her case. His voice was polished, his words crafted to paint a picture of Kara as a devoted dog owner and me as a bitter, vindictive husband using Peanut as a weapon. He brought up her claims of emotional distress and accused me of trying to humiliate her publicly. Kara played the part well, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue at the right moments, her head lowered as though she were the injured party. When it was our turn, my lawyer took the floor with the calm confidence of someone holding a royal flush. She presented the evidence methodically. Screenshots of Kara's erratic texts, testimony from witnesses about her neglect of Peanut during her nights away, and, most damning of all, the video of Kara drunkenly declaring her intent to take Peanut just to spite me. The video played on a monitor in the courtroom, Kara's slurred voice filling the silent room. Her face turned beet red as she heard herself say, "I don't care about the stupid dog. I'll take him just to make Jake suffer." The judge's expression was unreadable, but I saw the faint flicker of disapproval in his eyes as he watched the footage. Kara's lawyer tried to recover, scrambling to argue that the video was taken out of context, but the damage was done. My lawyer finished by stating that Peanut had been well cared for under my watch, supported by statements from our vet and the kennel staff. When the judge spoke, his voice was firm. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear who has acted in the best interest of the animal. Custody of Peanut will remain with Mr. Carson. Kara's smirk was gone, replaced by a look of disbelief and fury. She leaned toward her lawyer, hissing something under her breath, but it didn't matter. The gavel struck, and it was over. As I walked out of the courtroom, Peanut's future secure, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: freedom. Winning custody of Peanut felt like a victory not just in court but in life. As I left the courthouse, my lawyer shook my hand with a satisfied smile. "You handled that well," she said. Kara played her hand poorly, and it showed. I nodded, though my mind was elsewhere. It wasn't just about the court ruling. It was about reclaiming control over a life that Kara had tried to dismantle. But as much as I wanted to bask in the moment, I knew it wasn't over. Kara wouldn't accept defeat quietly. I was right. The very next day, Kara's tirade began anew. Social media became her battleground. Posts appeared on her accounts, each more inflammatory than the last. She accused me of lying, manipulating the courts, and even stealing Peanut from her. She wrote about how she'd sacrificed for me, only to be abandoned and betrayed. At first, I ignored it, but the flood of messages from mutual friends made it impossible to avoid. "Have you seen what Kara's saying?" one text read. "Are you okay?" asked another. Even Ashley called, her voice dripping with exasperation. "She's losing it, Jake." She's telling anyone who'll listen that you're the bad guy. It was Kara's way of lashing out, of trying to save face as her world crumbled around her. But the truth had a way of cutting through the noise. One by one, the responses to her posts began shifting. Friends who once blindly supported her started pushing back. "This doesn't add up, Kara," one commenter wrote. "Why didn't you fight for Peanut if you cared so much?" Another added, "I saw the video of you at the nightclub. Maybe you should take some responsibility for your actions." It didn't take long for her narrative to unravel. The fallout spread beyond our circle of friends. Kara's reputation at the nightclub took a massive hit as her coworkers distanced themselves from her erratic behavior. Ashley later told me that management had warned Kara about bringing personal drama into the workplace. "She's walking on thin ice," Ashley said. But Kara wasn't just losing her social standing. She was losing her grip entirely. A week after the hearing, I got an unexpected call from her mother. Though we'd never been particularly close, her voice was heavy with concern. "Jake," she began, "I don't know what's going on with Kara, but she's not herself. She's angry all the time, blaming everyone for her problems." She sighed. "I think she's hitting rock bottom." I didn't feel vindicated hearing those words, only tired. The woman who had once shared my life was now a stranger, unraveling in real time. That night, as Peanut curled up beside me, I thought about the life I was building without her. The chaos was fading, replaced by moments of peace and clarity. Kara's storm had passed, leaving me standing, stronger and freer than before. But for her, the storm was just beginning. Kara's unraveling was impossible to ignore, even from a distance. Social media became a diary of her bitterness, filled with passive-aggressive posts and vague proclamations of victimhood. But the impact wasn't confined to the digital realm. Her real life was crumbling faster than even I had expected. Ashley called again one evening, her voice laced with disbelief. "She got into it with the manager at the club," she said. "It was bad. She's been suspended." I felt no satisfaction in hearing it. Kara's spiral wasn't just self-destructive, it was desperate. She was burning bridges with everyone, and the flames were closing in fast. 2 days later, her mother called again. "She's been drinking too much," she admitted. "I tried talking to her, but she won't listen. I don't know what else to do." "Let her figure it out," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I felt a pang of guilt. Kara was my past, but part of me still hated to see anyone sink so low. That guilt didn't last long. The next morning, I found a note taped to my door, a rambling, barely legible letter from Kara. In it, she accused me of ruining her life, of turning her friends and family against her, of stealing Peanut. She promised that I would regret this and warned me that she wasn't done fighting. I stared at the letter, feeling a mix of anger and pity. She was grasping at straws, desperate to claw back some sense of control. But the Kara I once knew, the confident, lively woman I had fallen in love with, was gone. By the end of the week, Ashley confirmed what I had already suspected. Kara's suspension had turned into a termination. The club didn't want the drama, and Kara had become a liability. "She's blaming you for everything," Ashley said. But honestly, she did this to herself. And that was the truth. Kara's world wasn't falling apart because of me. It was collapsing under the weight of her own choices. With Kara out of the picture, life finally began to settle. Peanut and I fell into a rhythm, and the house felt lighter without her presence. For the first time in years, I was rediscovering who I was outside of our toxic relationship. I started going to the gym again, rebuilding the confidence that Kara's betrayal had eroded. I reconnected with old friends, many of whom expressed their relief at seeing me move on. "You're better off without her," they said, and I believed it. Even my work improved. With the emotional baggage lifted, I found new focus and energy, tackling projects I had once put off. My boss noticed, and I got a promotion within months. It wasn't just about moving on. It was about thriving. Just when I thought Kara's chapter in my life was closed, she made one last desperate attempt to reclaim control. It came in the form of a legal notice. Kara was suing for visitation rights to Peanut. "She's seriously doing this?" I asked my lawyer, dumbfounded. "She's grasping at straws," my lawyer replied. We can fight this easily. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. Still, the audacity of her move reignited the anger I thought I had buried. Kara's inability to let go wasn't just annoying. It was exhausting. The court hearing was brief. The judge dismissed her claim within minutes, citing her lack of evidence and her history of neglect. Kara's face twisted with fury as she stormed out of the courtroom. It was the last time I saw her. Months passed, and Kara became little more than a distant memory. Peanut and I moved to a new home, one untouched by the shadows of my past. I started dating again, cautiously at first. Trust was hard to rebuild, but I eventually met someone who understood what I had been through. She wasn't flashy or dramatic, just kind, steady, and genuine. With her, I found peace. Through mutual friends, I occasionally heard snippets about Kara. She was bouncing between jobs, unable to hold down anything steady. Her drinking had worsened, and her social circle had all but vanished. Even her mother had set boundaries, refusing to enable her self-destructive behavior any longer. "She's still blaming you," Ashley told me during one of our last conversations. "But nobody's buying it anymore." I wasn't angry or vengeful. I just felt nothing. Kara had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. On the anniversary of the court ruling, I took Peanut for a walk in the park. It was a sunny day, the kind that made everything feel fresh and full of possibility. As I watched him chase a squirrel, I realized how far I had come. Kara's betrayal had once consumed me, but now it was just a chapter in my story, a painful one, but not the defining one. I had learned, grown, and rebuilt. And as I stood there, watching Peanut bark joyfully at the trees, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: gratitude. For the lessons, for the freedom, and for the chance to start again.